Hey everyone, it's Sonic the Hedgehog Rules, otherwise known as the Snarky Entertainment System. Today I'm reviewing a little-known game called Shadow of Destiny. Since this is my first official review, I'll explain to you how the reviews work. I split them into two videos. In the first one, I run through the whole story of the game, so yes, there are spoilers. I repeat, there are spoilers. In the second video, I actually summarize all the components into an actual review. I don't think it needs much more explanation than that. So to start off this game, we have Ike Kush, your average Joe, and good fucking god, is this man average? I'll touch on that throughout. The game begins with Ike getting stabbed in the back and waking up in some trans-dimensional bedroom with a giant stone head in the middle. Some demonic voice contacts him and offers to help. He gives Ike a device to travel in time with the admonition that he can't just use the time travel to sidestep his death. He has to find the underlying cause of it and nip it in the bud. Imagine Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, except that if you died because a platform crumbled, you had to travel back 50 years to tell the architect to make that platform just a little better reinforced than the others. You return to life in a diner and quickly set out for the fortune teller right next door. She takes a liking to you and gives you an infinite amount of free readings to predict your next time of death. Honestly, after the first two chapters, it becomes fairly clear when you're going to die and how to stop it, so you don't see much of this bitch. But she offers a little advice. She sends you out to find a posse of people to surround you so the person who stabbed you won't stab you. Death avoided. Next, you're walking along and see a house on fire. Some kid says his grandpa's inside, so naturally Ike decides to run right into a burning building. One bystander comments,
Jeez, I don't think anybody can make it out of that mess.
Shocking everyone, as soon as he enters, smoke fills his lungs and he falls to the ground dead. The demon voice sends you back to the realm of the living, and you teleport to the past to stop the fire. You catch a glimpse of the arsonist, who looks suspiciously like the kid from earlier. But you pay it no mind. Death avoided. Deciding that perhaps running headfirst into burning buildings might be counterproductive to staying alive, Ike heads to the town square. The sexually charged waitress from earlier runs to deliver you some items you left behind at the bar, but some fucking monkey man jumps out of the tree and kills you. Once you return to life, you unlock a new time period and try going to it. But oh no! The waitress gets caught in your shenanigans and ends up back in the past with you. Where are you? Germany in the 1500s. This place is creepy as balls. All the people have pale, zombie-like flesh and sunken eyes. And to think, these people once considered themselves the master race. Anyway, you help out the town whore, Margaret, and she takes you back to her house to meet her dying mother and her brother with a severe Oedipus complex, Hugo. Not wanting to get wrapped up, Ike departs, noticing some guy planting a tree in the town square. The same tree the assassin was in. He won't let you change his mind about planting it unless you get the squire's seal, so by means of the lamest trading mission in video game history, you end up defacing the Lord's manor to get a seal to tell him to stop planting that tree. You return to the present and avoid death once again. Within 5 seconds, he realizes he left the waitress in the past, and then decides to quit smoking. Reality at its finest, ladies and gents. Ike remembers he had a meeting with the local museum's curator, Mr. Eckert, and prioritizes this above saving the waitress's life. He makes his way to the museum and chats with Mr. Eckert, who has some information to share about the alchemist whose house you visited in the 1500s and what kind of work he was doing. They also discuss other important matters.
By the way, do you like cats?
As you exit, the source of the demonic voice reveals itself, and it's some kind of weird man-girl that looks like if a Black Widow spider wanted to be human sexy but got fashion advice from a 1990s fat goth chick. Its name is Homunculus, and it proves its power by sending you back in time to the 70s to meet a young Mr. Eckert who has just had a baby. You travel back to the present and ask Eckert about his daughter. He breaks a vase, the same vase that killed you at the beginning of the chapter, and explains that his daughter was kidnapped and his wife was murdered. Impressed by Homunculus's power, Ike moves on. As he does so, he gets stabbed. Again. At this point, Homunculus is just pissed off and tells you to just get a fucking iron plate. Though this may be sarcasm, it falls on the deaf, uninterpretive ears of Ike Kush, who travels back to 1902 to find an actual iron plate. Instead, he finds the man who started the museum and his creepy daughter, who take kindly to this complete stranger who is the only color in their monochrome world. The daughter decides to sew up your jacket. Since Ike is incapable of facing the world without a jacket, he dons a juggler's outfit and mask, much like the one seen at the square earlier in the game. He also picks up a secret message egg and writes a message on it. He travels to the present day and takes the place of the juggler, tossing his message to his present self. "Get a frying pan," it says. When he returns to the past to collect his jacket, a frying pan falls out of his, frying pan pocket. He returns to the past using the frying pan as a shield to prevent being stabbed. All this dying has made Ike hungry, so he goes to a local bar to eat some grub. But, as is to be expected, the food has been poisoned by our ridiculously persistent assassin. Ike needs to find a cure, but laments the fact that there is no public library with that information in it. But then Ike realizes he is basically a god now, and decides to go back in time to convince the museum's founder to turn it into a library instead. His sick divine machinations complete, Ike returns to the present and reads up on the poison. Female sea hare. The only antidote? Male sea hare. But, due to some crazy why the last man phenomena in the animal kingdom, only females remain, so Ike has to go back to the Middle Ages to get some antidote from the alchemist. But his house has blown up, and the only person inside is Homunculus, who for some reason doesn't recognize our protagonist. Ike goes back in time a few days before that, to try again. The alchemist, Dr. Wagner, says he is working on experiments that require the Philosopher's Stone, pretty much making him no different than any alchemist in that day and age. He wants a life elixir to save his wife. Too bad, thinks Ike as he picks up the antidote to go. But Margaret wants to go on a quick walk with him, so they set out. They talk about unimportant things. Ike thinks he sees the waitress, but he can't catch up with her, and then they return home. Ike begins to think that this slut might be his ancestor. At this point, you can either tell her or not tell her, and for some reason, this decision will affect the outcome of the whole game. Either way, it doesn't matter so much right now. Hugo was eavesdropping, and that's all that matters. Margaret points out that he's been wearing a lock of his mother's hair, and he flips out on her. Ike is understandably uncomfortable and makes a run for it. He returns to the present and downs the antidote. Having turned his life into the longest Final Destination movie ever, Ike now finds himself crossing the street and being run down by a car. Like before, Ike decides to solve this problem by having people around him at the time of the murder. How does he settle this? He goes back to the 70s, finds a starving filmmaker, and gives him a film pitch guaranteed to be a blockbuster, so fangirls will gather around a poster at the corner of Ike's fate. However, it's missing a little extra oomph, so Ike leads the filmmaker right to the scene of the crime where Eckert's wife was shot and his baby was taken. We find out Homunculus took the baby, and that Ike is not the brightest, fleeing the crime scene just as he is being questioned by some men who think he looks suspicious. However, it gives the director the inspiration he needs, and the fangirls do gather around the poster in the present, and the assassin is deterred yet again. But Ike's interest in trying to save Eckert's wife does lead to this pretty epic speech from Homunculus.
Now really, what is it this time? The Good Samaritan. Didn't I tell you? Fate makes a powerful opponent. It's tough enough changing your own fate. You can't do much to someone else's. Doing it over again doesn't mean you're going to get it right anytime soon. You may put yourself through the pain, the tears, again and again.
Ike gets a call from Eckert asking him to meet him at the museum, or library tower. Anyone with half a brain can tell what will happen next, but Ike is not particularly genre savvy. No, he's not savvy in any regard whatsoever. Eckert pushes him off the tower to his death, and Ike corrects this action by going back in time and tying a rope around the railing so he can catch himself. Somehow, this bullshit plan works out. He questions Eckert, who has calmed down substantially, and reveals that he was blackmailed by the assassin and plans to turn himself into the police. Ike forgives him, and Eckert says he will now help in any way possible, proving in one scene that Ike is a dumbass, and Eckert is substantially more dynamic and a better protagonist than the one we've been dealt. Ike notices a new painting of a girl that looks remarkably like the waitress from earlier, with a stone that looks remarkably like the stone from earlier. He goes back to when the painting was done to track her down. Here's where the story starts to split. If you told the town whore that she was your ancestor, you will not have the option to ask the waitress to return with you. She gives you the stone and gets on with her life. Ike delivers the stone to the alchemist, which happens to be the Philosopher's Stone, per a request Homunculus made earlier in the game. The alchemist tells you to return in 10 days and sends his children away. 10 days later, his house has blown up. There's a time machine in the basement set for the present. When you travel back to the present, you get a call from the killer. And it's the whore's brother with the Oedipus complex. He blames you for the experiment his father was doing, which was to create the homunculus using the Philosopher's Stone. He holds Margaret hostage and demands you bring Homunculus to him. From this point, there are 4 different endings you can get. In the A ending, you go back to the day where Eckert's baby was taken, and you meet with Homunculus, who says he traded Eckert's baby with the baby Margaret, meaning she's not actually your ancestor. So if the kid kills her, it doesn't mean shit to Ike. Next, you go to the fortune teller, who reveals that she is the eternal spirit of Hugo's mother, who was released when he was messing around in the alchemist's lab one day. Homunculus meets you outside and offers to help resolve the situation. You suggest calling up the spirit of the alchemist to stop the boy. He does, but instead of calling him off, he eats his fucking soul. Homunculus says the alchemist was a fake, but a means to an end no less. Ike shrugs it off. The whore decides to stay in the future. Ike is about to hand back the time travel device when he drops it, and a shard snaps off and hits Homunculus, making him explode.
Oh no.
Yeah, that just happened. You can also choose to just visit Homunculus or just visit the fortune teller. These decisions lead to endings B1 and B2. If you just visit Homunculus, then Eckert shows up to jump the killer and command him to stop. He repents, and that's about it. If you visit just the fortune teller, Ike sends Hugo there to make peace with his mother. However, his mother decides to just collapse the house on top of him instead. Ike takes Margaret home to wallow in her misery of being completely alone, and then Ike goes and gets drunk. Another option here is to travel back to the Middle Ages to destroy the research notes the killer used to develop his hostile intent towards you. You arrive just as an elderly Hugo shows up to deliver a time machine to his younger self. Ike jumps up to call the old Hugo out on his bullshit, making him freak out and run away, but Margaret is blocking the stairs. The old Hugo starts swinging his cane at her, but the young one gets protective and tackles him. A paradox absorbs them both. Ike returns to the past to relish in how awesome his life is, despite having ruined the lives of at least 7 people. Then the karma car busts in and runs him right over. There are 2 more endings available if you didn't tell Margaret that you might be related. If this is the case, you have an option whether or not to bring the waitress back to the present. If you do, then Hugo takes the waitress hostage instead, and you have to bring his sister back from the past to chew the kid out and make him feel bad so he'll give up. Oh yeah, and she bitch slaps him.
Hugo!
Ike asks Homunculus what happened to the alchemist, and he explains that Dr. Wagner simply wished to never have to see Homunculus again, so he sent the alchemist to hell. Ike and the waitress flirt.
Come on, Dad.
And it's creepy. The last ending you can get occurs if you didn't tell Margaret about your ancestry and you left the waitress in the past. When you give the stone to the alchemist, you advise that he might want to draw a pentagram on the ground. He comments on how he envies your youth. Later, after Hugo makes his threats, Ike returns to the exploded house and burns Wagner's notes. When you return to the present, Hugo and Margaret slowly start to fade out of existence because of the paradox you created. We catch another glimpse of how Homunculus' creation occurred, and the alchemist asks for eternal youth. Homunculus grants it, but the alchemist calls on the pentagram to seal the demon away. Homunculus is just pissed off and erases Wagner's mind as he disappears into oblivion. The smoke clears, and we see that the young alchemist is Ike, cursed with youth but no memory, doomed to repeat the same mistakes again. That's a lot to take in, isn't it? But what if I told you there was more? Yes, after you've gotten all of these endings, you unlock the EX mode, which you basically activate through a few different dialogue options at the beginning of the game. The conceit of this mode is that Ike has all his memories, but no one else does. You go through the motions of the first few chapters, except that you can access the Middle Ages as early as the fire level. You have two choices of endings here. Either take the Philosopher's Stone with you into the fire and die, and then kill Homunculus with it in his trans-dimensional bedroom like so. Or you can go back to the Middle Ages and give the stone to Wagner so he can make the life elixir for his wife. Thus, his wife doesn't die, and he doesn't create Homunculus, so he never wishes for youth and never becomes you. Except, somehow, you still find a way to exist in the present. In other words, this game is fucking confusing. Check in later for a full review.